everyone, welcome to Molly's Flower Shop. I'm your host Molly and I'm so excited to have you here in my kitchen for my new baking show, which is brought to you by JATVMedia Services. You can catch my show every month on JATV's channel, Charter 994, or on YouTube, or my website, mollysflowershop.com. Summer is already winding down, which is a little hard to believe, but we're here in September, and as summer gets to a close, and throughout the year, I like to think about those seasonal fruits and vegetables that I can use in my cooking and my baking. And when a fruit or vegetable is at the peak of its season, that means it's not only the most delicious it is throughout the year, but it's also the healthiest for you. So I'm going to be celebrating stone fruit, and if you're not familiar, that means plums, peaches, cherries, apricots, any type of a fruit that has a hard pit on the inside. So we'll be celebrating stone fruit today by making a delicious and beautiful plum tart that is going to be in a short crust tart pastry with a vanilla pastry cream, also known as Crème Patissiere. So let's get right into this. The wonderful thing about this very special dessert is that you can make each component ahead of time, which is really nice for if you're a little bit busy, but you want to put something really special together for maybe a fancy brunch, maybe kind of a special later in the summer dinner party, something like that. And you want to put something really special on the table. So you can break each component down and make it ahead of time, and then put everything together right before you're ready to serve it. I'm going to be teaching you how to make 3 different things today. I'll be showing you how to make something called a Pate Brisee, also known as a short crust pastry or a tart crust. A lot of times baking is a little bit complicated because there are more than one different name for the same thing. So we'll be making a tart crust, and for that you will need a special piece of equipment. It's called a tart pan. It's kind of special because it has this special crimped edge around the side, and then it also has what's called a false bottom or a removable bottom. And the only difference that makes is it's just really easy to get the dessert off once it's baked. So we'll be using a tart pan, and that can come in usually 9-inch, 12-inch, or even small tartlet pans like I have here. This is about a 4.5-inch. And this dough can work for any of these sizes, which is really nice. They're not super hard to find. You can go to your grocery store or a specialty baking shop and get them for about $10 to $15. Order them online, or they're really easy to find at secondhand stores for just a couple of dollars, which is why I have so many different sizes. Usually when I see one in the store, I grab one up. And then I'll be showing you also how to make something called a Crème Patissiere, which is a very fancy French word for pastry cream. We'll be cooking that on the stove, which is a little bit different. So we'll cook the crust separately, the crème pat, as it's also called, separately. It's kind of like an eggy custard, almost like a pudding, but just a little bit more special. And then also we'll be finishing off our dessert not only with all the beautiful plums and stone fruit, but with a homemade whipped cream. And I guarantee after you learn how to make homemade whipped cream, you'll never buy the store-bought stuff again. So we're going to get started first with our crust. So first I'll be working on my Pate Brisee, which is also that short crust pastry or tart crust. They all mean the same thing. So whenever I say any of those words, that's what I'm talking about. I'm going to be starting with my dry ingredients, which is 1 1/4 cup just plain flour. And I haven't sifted this. It's okay the way it is. A lot of flours are pre-sifted in the bag, but this doesn't have to be specially sifted. I'm going to add a 1/3 cup just plain white granulated sugar, and then just a pinch of salt. So those are good. I'm going to stir those together in the bowl. All right. In a separate bowl, I have just 1 egg yolk here. So with that, I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of very cold water. And just a second ago, this glass had ice cubes in it. So very, very cold, not just out of the tap. 2 tablespoons there. And then a teaspoon of vanilla, which is about that much. And using this adorable mini whisk from my aunt, I'm going to mix that together and set it aside for just a moment. And then last but not least, I'm going to be adding cubed, unsalted, cold butter. So my butter is still in the fridge. I don't even let it sit out for a few minutes before I need to use it. And the reason being is it's important to have chilled butter go into pastry crust like this, because if the butter's too soft, it can actually melt out once the dough is incorporated together, and you can end up with a weakened pastry crust. You can kind of have holes in the crust. We want a nice strong crust. So I'm going to take my butter out and mix it in here. I'm going to be using a pastry cutter. Pastry cutters can come in kind of different shapes and sizes. This one's just a wire cutter. If you don't have this at home, don't worry about it. You can use 2 butter knives and do a cutting motion, which I'll show you. If you don't want to bother doing it by hand, you can very easily do it in a stand mixer with a paddle attachment, or a lot of people even do it in their food processor to incorporate the butter. So let me grab that and I'll show you what to do next. Okay, so like I said, cold, chilled butter, unsalted, right out of the fridge. This is 4 ounces, which is equal to just 1 stick of regular butter. I do recommend always using regular butter, not margarine. Margarine's just not a whole ingredient. Butter's always better to use in baking. Its melting point is truer, and I just always recommend spending the money on the butter and getting that instead of margarine or another kind of vegetable replacement. So if you're comfortable with using butter, I would recommend it. And I like to sort of sprinkle my butter around into the flour so it doesn't get kind of all clumped together, which it sometimes can do. It just makes it a little bit easier for everything to incorporate. So 4 ounces cold butter, in we go. Let me wipe that butter off my fingers. And now I'm going to, it's called cutting in, so I'm going to cut in my cold butter into my flour and sugar and salt mixture. And you want to give this a good couple of minutes worth of work, because you do want that butter to kind of be broken down and well incorporated throughout the flour. And you want to get these down to about the size of small peas, cornmeal, breadcrumbs. That's kind of a good idea of what consistency you're going for. You can do this by actually just your fingers. You can sort of work the flour in with the butter, kind of break it up with your fingers. But if you do it that way, you do run the risk of melting it a little bit, which is fine because you can just stick it back in the fridge if you need to. But if you don't want to bother with that few added extra minutes, using tools like this would be fine. You could probably even do this with a fork, but spend a couple bucks on a pastry cutter if you're planning on making tarts often at all, and it'll save you a lot of time. Okay, so I think we're looking pretty good. We're just about to that kind of ground cornmeal consistency. Really want to see those nice small pieces. And that's just so your butter is nice and evenly distributed. Butter makes everything taste better, so you want everybody to get a bite when they're eating your plum tart, right? Okay, that feels and looks pretty good to me. So now what I'm going to do is take my wet ingredients that I mixed a couple minutes ago, and I'm going to incorporate it here. I'm going to take a large fork, just kind of bring everything together. I'm not going to overmix. I just want it to just start coming together so I'm not seeing kind of flour pieces hanging out. And then I'm going to lay it out and form it into a disc. At that point, you can do 2 different things, actually 3. Put it in the refrigerator for 20 to 30 minutes and let it chill out. Or if you're not going to use it today, you can let it chill in the fridge overnight. If you don't want to use this for a while, but maybe just have some time on a Sunday or something, want to make a couple pastry crusts for a rainy day, you can put them actually in the freezer, very tightly wrapped in saran wrap as well. Or, like I'm going to do, you can roll it out right away and get working with it. So that's what I'm going to do. All right, now I have my wet ingredients incorporated with my dry, and I'm just using a large, it's like a salad serving fork. I use it to mix stuff a lot. I use it a lot more than I use it for salad. And I'm just going to kind of bring everything around the bowl until it starts to come together. And I've noticed that this crust recipe can be a little deceiving because it seems so dry. And I have in the past added too much moisture because I just didn't believe that it was really ready. But it comes together even though it looks a little bit dry. Okay, so I feel like this is nice and mixed, and now I'm going to kind of pat it into a ball, into a nice firm disc, and then we will go through kind of the rolling out process, which can be a little bit intimidating if you've never done it before, but don't worry, I will show you how to do it. So I've gathered up my dough out of my mixing bowl and I've set it down on the counter, and I'm going to refrigerate it for 20 minutes. It just kind of solidifies everything. Sometimes when you try to do it right after you've gathered it up, it just kind of crumbles apart. That butter needs some time to kind of bring it all back together. So I have it into a nice ball. I'm going to wrap it in plastic wrap and just leave it in the fridge for 20 to 30 minutes. Longer is fine, but 20 to 30 should firm it back up so you'll be ready to roll. I have my chilled pastry dough. It's been in the refrigerator for 20 to 30 minutes. As you can see, the texture has changed a lot because that butter had a chance to harden up. So now we are going to roll it out, and I want it to be a little bit bigger than my actual tart pan, so it has the opportunity to kind of crawl up the sides and make that nice crimped edge that it has. And if you notice, I've floured my surface a little bit, and I have floured my rolling pin a little bit, and that's to prevent things from sticking. And then I'm picking it up and turning it because I don't want it to end up sticking to my surface. I'm sure professional bakers have cooled surfaces or marble that maybe stays cold, but I don't have that, so I just work with what I have, which I'm sure is what most of us have to do. So as you can see, slowly but surely we're getting there. Now a lot of times you want to be kind of gentle. You don't want your dough to be sticking. If you push down too hard, you might run the risk of getting it stuck. Even pressure, even pushes. You don't have to do it super fast back and forth, just even pressure all the way across. I've got a little split here, but I'm going to do a little patchwork to fix that up. I'll show you how to do that. It's probably not perfect technique, but it's what I have. Okay, we're looking pretty close. I'm going to grab my tart pan and see how we're doing here. I think that'll do it. We're about 1/4 inch thick, and that's right where I want to see it. Now, don't be intimidated by putting the tart dough in the tin. It's kind of scary the first couple times you do it, or maybe it's just scary for people like me who really care about stuff like this. But what I do is I don't try to do it with my hands, because sometimes when you pick that up, your fingers can break through and then you've ruined it and have to start over. So what I do is I gently roll my dough right onto my rolling pin, and then I just go right back over the top. Done. See, isn't that easy? And then what I'm going to do is very gently, using my fingers. Some people use pastry rollers. I think they're a little cumbersome. I just use my fingers. And you're just going to tuck the dough gently into your tart pan. Look at that. This one is going to turn out great. I can feel it. And that patchwork trick I was talking to you about is what I'm doing right now. I had a little crack, and I don't anymore. Another thing you can do is peel off a little excess dough, form it into a little ball, because you're not going to be using it anyway. And then you can use that to kind of press your dough a little tighter into those nice, that nice crimp. And you want it to be pretty firm in there. This tart pan is non-stick, so I don't have to worry about it getting stuck to anything. Okay, and that looks pretty good to me. And then I'll show you another kind of a cool trick. To quickly trim all of this excess dough off. Boom! Done. And then he kind of perforates it. And there you go. Look how easy that was. I got a little bubble here, so I'm just gonna fix that a little bit. Okay, so our pastry dough is done. It's in the tart pan. Now remember, if you're using one with a false bottom, careful when you pick it up. You don't want your fingers to push too hard and lift that bottom up and bring your dough up too high. So grab it from the sides. We're going to do kind of a special baking process for this Pate Brisee, and it's called blind baking. And what that means is we're going to cover the dough with either foil or parchment paper. I like to use foil because I like that it has a little bit more form to it. And then I'm actually going to cover the bottom of the foil, and I'll show how to do that in just a second, with, they're called pastry weights or pie weights, baking beads. They have a lot of different names, but I'm actually not even going to use them. I'm going to use the bargain version, which is dried red beans. So if you don't have pie weights or pastry beads at home, you can use just dry red beans or kidney beans, whatever, 50 cents at the supermarket. You can use raw whole grain or raw long grain rice. Those work perfectly fine. So the reason we're going to do a blind bake is because sometimes when you have pastry dough like this, it can burn very quickly and it can rise when you don't want it to. You want a nice thin, short pastry. So I'm going to prick it a couple times with a fork, cover it in foil, fill it with baking beads, bake that off for 20 minutes in a 375-degree oven. The oven rack is going to be in the bottom third of the oven. I'll do that for 20 minutes. Then I'll take the tart out. I will take the foil and the beans out, and then I'll bake it for another about 5 minutes or so until it's pale golden brown. You don't want dark and golden for these, pale golden brown. So let's get that process started. I'm just going to gently put my foil into my tart pan. I'm going to cover it all the way over the edge because I don't want the edges of my pastry to burn. Oh, I didn't prick it with a fork. Whoops. That helps from preventing it from rising because it lets any air bubbles out. A lot of times we like our desserts to be nice and big and voluminous, but not with these. We want it to be nice and close. Okay, now we've got our foil on. Then I'm going to put my poor man's pie weights in there. Dry red beans. Perfect, and you can use these over and over and over and over and over again. I don't know how many times I've used these, but it's a lot. So I just keep them in a Ziploc bag on my baker's rack, and I use them every time I have to do a blind bake. So in the oven they go, 375 degrees, lower third of the oven for 20 minutes. Then we'll check on it and see how much longer we need to go. Okay, we even have enough. We can probably make 3 more mini tartlets if we wanted to with this extra dough. So I'm going to wrap this up, put it in the fridge to chill, and then let's get started on our pastry cream. Now that my tart crust is in the oven and blind baking, now we can get started on our Crème Patissiere, or also known as Crème Pat or pastry cream. It's like a thick, eggy custard. It's similar to the consistency of like a thick vanilla pudding. And we have to do some stove work for this because we're actually going to be slowly cooking eggs and tempering that with hot milk. So first thing I'm going to do is take 2 cups of whole milk and put it in a saucepan on the stove at about medium heat until it's scalding. So what that means is not boiling. We don't want to see the milk boiling, but just kind of starting to form some bubbles around the edge. So let me get this on the stove and then I'll come back and show you how to do the rest. So just very simply 2 cups of milk. And I'm going to do about medium heat. And we can just let that sit. It won't hurt it. And now we're going to do the rest of the components for the creme pat. So I have 6 egg yolks here. And then a half a cup of sugar. So I'm going to combine those in a slightly bigger bowl. And it's just white sugar. Give that a whisk. The really fun thing about making creme pat is all of the kind of different consistencies that you see throughout it. If you care at all about chemistry, and I'm kind of a nerd when it comes to that stuff, that's part of why I love baking so much. It's all chemistry, really. Creme pat is kind of a great way to see all the different things that can happen to eggs and sugar when you put them together. All right, so that was just 6 egg yolks and 1/2 cup of sugar. Now I'm going to add some cornstarch, which is a binder, and this is 1/3 cup of cornstarch. So I'm going to add that in there, and then a pinch of salt. And now we can watch the texture of the eggs change again. And cornstarch is like light as air, so that's why I'm making such a mess right now. So as you can see, it was kind of granulated and thick, and now it's smoothing out. Color has changed a little bit. It's a lot more velvety, and it'll help it bind. Okay, that looks good to me. So our kind of egg base is set to go for our creme pat. I just got to wait for that milk to come to scalding, which again is that just a little bit of bubbling around the edges. Takes 5 to 10 minutes, 5 to 8 minutes maybe. So I'm going to go check on that. I've got 10 minutes left on my tart. So what we could do is maybe slice some plums and get those ready to go for the top of our tart. While waiting for my milk to come to scalding, I have sliced up 3 plums. These are the nice purple plums. They have kind of an orange center. And then I'm going to throw some raspberries on there too, just for fun. When I show you how to decorate the tart, once you get to the middle, sometimes it can be a little bit awkward to find good places for the pieces of plum to sit in the middle. So I usually just pile on some raspberries or berries. And if you maybe aren't a fan of stone fruit, maybe you don't like peaches, plums, nectarines, apricots, if you're not a fan, you can use any kind of fruit for this dessert. A lot of times pastries like this are usually seen with strawberries, raspberries, blueberries, kiwi. Those are really common fruits to see. You can even take all of those berries, kiwi fruit, sliced grapes, kind of mix them up almost into a fruit salad and kind of sprinkle those on top. That's also kind of a common way to serve this and super delicious. And berries are so easy to find year-round, whereas stone fruit, like I'm using, is seasonal right now. I'm going to go check on that milk. Not quite there. As you can see, it's not really doing anything. We're starting to see a little bit of steam, but those bubbles aren't there. So I'll take a moment to explain to you exactly what I'm going to do once my milk has come to scalding. I'm going to bring it over here and mix it in with my egg base, and I'm going to do it very slowly, and this is called tempering. The reason we have to do that is if we dump our hot milk in too fast, we run the risk of scrambling our eggs, and that would be bad. There's a couple different steps when it comes to making the creme pat where you could run the risk of doing that. So I'm going to slowly pour the milk in, give it a couple mixes around to incorporate that hot temperature in with my cold eggs, and then slowly pour the rest in. It's going to really thin out. It's almost going to be watery, and oddly enough, it kind of smells like macaroni and cheese. I don't know why, it just does. So I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to put it right back in that same pan, and then I'm going to stand at the stove like a soldier for 5 to 8 minutes and whisk and whisk and whisk and not leave, because if you do leave, again, you will end up with scrambled eggs, and that's no good in a tart. So you have to make sure that you have those 8 minutes set aside. One time I made the mistake of letting my dog in. My eggs were scrambled almost immediately. So make sure you have those 8 minutes, and then we can finish our pastry cream that way. Okay, so if you look here, we're getting some bubbles over the edges, so that's exactly what I want to see. I'm going to lose the heat, take it off the stove, and then bring it back over here. And like I said, and I'm going to make a bit of a mess here. There's no way to pour this in without making a mess, I swear. So I'm going to pour in just a little at a time. Well, glory be. I just about did it. All right, slowly, slowly. All right, let me get these out of the way so you guys can see what I'm doing here. I swear to you, it smells like mac and cheese. It's totally weird, but it doesn't end up tasting like that. I don't want to throw you off. All right, now I'm gonna make a mess. Almost pulled it off, but not quite. All right, and see, we're just back to liquid. Isn't baking the best? All right, let's go all the way back in. I'm gonna wipe this off so I don't burn it on the stove. Okay, so as you can see, we are back to liquid form. Our hot milk is incorporated with our cold egg base. I'm gonna put it right back in that stove, right back in the saucepan on the stove. Low to medium heat, about a third of the way up the dial. And then I'm gonna stand there, like I said, and not move until my custard has come together. So let's do that. Let's try not to make a mess, but no promises. It is a kitchen. Haha, I did it. All right. Okay. So the first couple times you make custard, you may think that you're going crazy and you've been standing here forever and you aren't getting custard. But I assure you that if you stand here for 5 to 8 minutes and you keep stirring and keep stirring, it will turn into custard, and it happens in about a second. 1 minute it's liquid and you don't think it's ever going to happen, and the next you've got a beautiful creamy custard. So just don't give up. Don't turn the heat up to try to speed up the process. Just let the chemistry happen. I'm about 3 minutes in and nothing's really happening. But I bet if I give it another 2 minutes, I'll have custard. And that's exactly what's happening. And check that out. Isn't that awesome? All right, so I turn the heat off just like that. Pastry cream. It's amazing. So through that amazing experiment of chemistry, we have Crème Patissiere now. And I'm going to scrape it into a bowl. Watch this. This is crazy. This was liquid a few minutes ago. Look at that. It's velvety and smooth. It's hot as hot can be right now, so you can't even really taste it, but I assure you, it smells awesome. I'm sure it's going to taste awesome. But we won't know for 2 to 3 hours because you do have to chill the creme pat in the fridge for 2 to 3 hours before you use it. It's okay for a couple days. Everything's fine in the fridge, but it does have to be cold for a while before you can use it. What I'm going to do is use some cling wrap. Isn't this stuff the worst? It works for so many different things. I can just never get it to do what I want. So I'm going to cover it and actually press it down on top of your creme pat. And that's to prevent that icky little skin from forming. You know what I'm talking about. All right, let's put that in the fridge. See you in 2 to 3 hours. And just like clockwork, the oven's ready. All right, so this tart crust has been baking for 23 minutes and I like how it's looking. So I'm going to gently lift my beans, set them in a bowl here. And as you can see, I crunched it on one side, which is a bummer, but that's okay. We're just about there. I'm gonna push it back in for, gosh, 3 minutes. And then see how it looks after that. The first couple times I made tart dough, I didn't realize that I just wanted a very pale golden. You know, when you're looking for baked bread or baked goods, a lot of times you want that golden brown, a little bit darker, but not with pastry dough. You want it to be nice and light and pale golden brown. So I only want to leave it in there a couple more minutes and then check on it again. All right, so my oven is going off. I know it's ready, so I'm going to turn the heat off. I'm married to a firefighter, so he has this issue with me leaving the oven on. It's so weird. Now remember that false bottom very carefully. I don't usually like to do that, but I don't have free hand. All right, and here we go. Careful, careful. And that is a perfectly baked tart crust. Just barely dark golden around the edges here, and we have a nice light pale golden color on the majority of the tart. That's exactly what we're looking for. It hasn't risen up too much. That was from the blind baking that we did with the beans, as well as pricking it with a fork. This looks just perfect. I can't wait to fill it with my pastry cream. I'm going to set it in the fridge just to kind of cool it down a little bit before we fill it. And in the meantime, we're going to make some homemade whipped cream, which is so good, and I'm really excited to show you how to do that. So my tart crust is ready to go. I'm just chilling it out a little bit in the fridge. You can leave it out on the counter if you don't need it right away, but I can't wait to fill it, so I'm going to chill it just a little bit so my cold creme pat doesn't hit a hot tart crust. And then in the meantime, we're going to make some whipped cream. So it's really easy to go to the supermarket and pick up a can or a tub of prepared whipped cream, and that's fine. But it's so easy to make your own, and I promise you it tastes 10 times better. Plus there's no added oils and stuff. Sometimes whipped cream gets that kind of weird separated thing if you buy it from the store. This is homemade. It's 3 very simple ingredients. It couldn't taste better. I promise if you try it one time and you taste it, you'll never buy it from the store ever again. So the important thing is we have to start with cold cream. This is just heavy whipping cream. You buy it in the dairy aisle. And then this works really well with a stand mixer. You can do a hand mixer as well. You can even whip it by hand with a whisk if you have the upper body strength and you want to spend the time doing it. You can also freeze your beater attachment and your bowl. Just stick it in the freezer for about 5 minutes. That helps really keep things chilled. And so in goes 1 cup of fresh heavy cream. I have 2 tablespoons of powdered sugar. And then you can add in whatever essence you like. Most people do vanilla. I could do about a teaspoon or half a teaspoon of vanilla. I'm actually going to do almond extract for this one. That's because it goes so nicely with stone fruit. Cherry almond, peach almond, delicious. Almond's a very strong flavor, so I'm just going to do a drop. Not even 1/8 of a teaspoon. Just a touch of almond flavor. We're going to beat this 3 to 4 minutes on high until we see soft peaks, and I'll show you what that looks like in a second. All right, it's been about 4 minutes, and I'm going to show you what we're looking for here. Let me take my bowl off. And this is about a medium peak. As you can see, it kind of has like a soft to medium peak on it. It's so good, and it's so easy. And everyone should be making their own whipped cream. They really just should. We're from Wisconsin. We should be out buying our own cream and making it ourselves. So I'm going to put this into a container, and this can keep in the fridge for about a week. Look at that. Isn't that beautiful? No added oils. You don't even have to put sugar in it if you don't want to. I just like to give it a little bit of sweetness. But if you just want to beat the cream a little bit, you've got homemade whipped cream. Literally, whipped cream. All right, so I have my creme pat all nice and chilled. And after it sits there for a while, it kind of needs to be reestablished a little bit. Kind of gets a little lumpy when it chills out in the fridge for a while. So let's just press that down, smooth it out a scotch. Does anyone else say the word scotch? I don't know where I got that from, but I say it all the time, and everyone always gives me weird looks. All right, that works for me. All right, so we are just gonna generously heap our creme pat into our tart crust. Let's start there and see what happens. I just use a spatula for this part. If you want to get fancy and use a pastry knife, you can do that. Spoon it out. I think we need a little more, don't you? Let's fill it all the way up. There's no time to be stingy, it's pastry cream. I've seen this done with like a cream cheese base, a little bit more dairy forward than, almost kind of like a cheesecake rather than a pastry cream, but I like to pretend that I'm in France, spending all of my spare time with Julia Child, so if I can make a recipe traditional French way, that's how I do it. Okay, I think that looks perfect. Now the fun part. I'm going to decorate this using freshly sliced purple plums. I'm going to add a couple of raspberries to the middle just because I feel like it. But you can do anything you want with this. You can use absolutely any fruit. Be careful to make it kind of easy to bite into, not too big of the pieces. If you're doing strawberries, I would probably dice them up a little bit or at least quarter them. Blueberries are great, raspberries are great. Just be mindful of when people are actually taking a bite of it. You don't want it to be a little bit too cumbersome. So what I'm going to do is I'll take my plums and I'm going to decorate this kind of in a radial pattern, and then I'm just going to mound the raspberries right in the middle. There is no science to this. We're all friends here. So be as creative as you want, or as non-creative as you want. You want to save time, I would just take a bunch of different mixed fruit, toss it in a bowl, and oops, dump it on top. I just think it looks so pretty when they're all kind of spiraled in on each other. You didn't see that? It is so good. I hope you guys make this. It's a little more complicated, especially if you watched my first episode. It was lemon cupcakes and berry cream. Berry buttercream rather, and it was super easy to throw together, and I love that. I love super simple recipes, but sometimes I like a good challenge too. And I don't think any of these are particularly difficult, any of these components for the tart. They're just a little bit more time consuming, but if you have time the day before, you can put all these things together and save time the next day. And if you try a pastry crust and you don't get it right the first time, don't feel badly about that at all. We all need practice with the things that we like to do. I burned a couple. You know, that's just the way it goes. I think that's really coming together nicely. I think this would look really pretty with peaches. If you're a fan of apricots, I am. They have that beautiful light orange color. Plums are gorgeous. Can you imagine pitted cherries on here? Yum! That's my favorite summer fruit. And I think that looks great. And then, like I said, look at these beautiful raspberries. So the last thing that we have to do, not quite the last, but almost the last thing we have to do, is actually take the tart out of the tart pan. This can be a little bit scary, but we all have to do it. So the great thing about false bottoms, get out of there you, is they lift right off. Please don't be stuck. I wanted to show this process because it can be terrifying, but it can also be super satisfying. Look at that. I get a little bit fearful every time I do that, but it's always worked out. So I don't know what I'm so afraid of. Doesn't that look nice? Okay, get my bracelet off here. Lots of dishes to do when you bake as much as I do. Okay, so now we have it on our serving platter, and now we are on to the very last step. What I've done is I've taken about a 1/3 cup or so of apricot jam, and heated it up. I just used the microwave. If you want to use stovetop, you can do that too. And don't boil it like I did. Just about 30 seconds. Warm it up. And you can skip this step, but I recommend not. Because what we are going to do is lightly brush everything with the apricot jam. And this does two things. As you can see, the first thing it does is shine everything up and just make it look glistening and beautiful. Almost looks pretend. In my mind, it looks like it belongs in a French patissiere window. I think the French chefs would probably disagree with me on that, but that's okay. I can pretend. And the other great thing is a lot of times, you know, when you leave fruit out for a while, it oxidizes and turns kind of funky colors like apples tend to do, or a lot of different types of fruits. The great thing about this is it kind of seals everything, and it makes it kind of stay true to its color. And it just looks so pretty, just makes it shine and glisten. Kind of takes it up a notch, I think. And it's a very simple addition. And if you don't have apricot jam, you can use marmalade. You can probably use strawberry jam. You can probably use any old jam you have sitting around, but apricot's nice because it doesn't take away from any of the colors. It just kind of glazes it. Maybe a little orangey, but not too bad. A little bit more. Some people will push it through a sieve to kind of get these fruit pieces out, as you can see, but I don't mind them so much. I think they look fine. Rustic, right? That's what we call it. It's rustic. It's a rustic tart from the French countryside. That's where we are. And that's it. So here you have it, a plum tart, some raspberries in the middle. This is a Pate Brisee short crust pastry with a beautiful vanilla pastry cream or Crème Patissiere in the middle. I hope you take the time to put this recipe together. Remember, you can make all the components separately. You don't have to do it in one fell swoop like I did. You can make the crust a day ahead of time or even a month ahead of time and just keep it in the freezer. You can make your creme pat the day before. Obviously, the cutting up of the fruit and putting it on the actual tart doesn't take very long. So I really hope you challenge yourself to put this together like I did. Then I hope you get a chance to try it because it's so delicious. The last thing we're going to do is add a big, beautiful dollop of whipped cream. I'll do that right in the middle. And then I would serve every piece with extra whipped cream on the side. I hope you've enjoyed joining me in my kitchen for Molly's Flower Shop. Please join me next month. We'll be making more beautiful seasonal desserts for the month of October. If you have any questions or you want to talk to me or leave me a comment, you can go to my website. It's mollysflowershop.com. I'm also on Facebook, Molly's Flower Shop, or you can follow me on Instagram at Molly's Flower Shop. Thanks again for joining me. We'll see you next month. And remember, life's short. Eat the cookie.